I do this every single time. Takes me a second.
That's fine.
Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome to a new video. It's another episode of the podcast. Today we have Indy with us. Do you just want to say a couple words about yourself as a bit of an introduction?
Yeah, sure. My name's Indy. I currently do AI advisory work for the public sector, but outside of work, which is obviously why we're here today, I like to keep myself and my mind busy, so I play football, I read a lot, and I sometimes do meditation, which I think is how you and I bonded when we first met.
Cool, thank you. So the point of this podcast is to take some of the people in my life and just have a bit of discussion around some of the philosophies we follow, some of the things that we sort of have probably touched on in our day-to-day lives, but never have really talked about in depth. And I think the point of this podcast is to sort of capture those ideas and chronicle them, so that sometimes I can look back on and just, get a bit introspective about the thoughts that we share with people, and just learn a bit about the philosophy that people sort of live their life by. So we have sort of preempted this slightly, in which case I've told Indy that this is what the podcast is about, but I have not heard what you're about to say. But that's what the discussion will be about today. So do you wanna share your bit of philosophy?
Yeah. So how I would describe my philosophy is I like to enjoy life, but always making sure to try and leave the life that I have in a better place than when I found it. And what that means is that you can interpret that on a longer term scale, medium term scale, and short term scale. In the longer term, I think, on my deathbed, I think I would think, I have lived a good life if I have some happy memories, and I've also made the lives of people around me better.
Right.
And then in the medium term, I think it's also about minimizing the harm that you create to things like the environment and animal welfare. And then I think that philosophy can also apply for like the short-term immediate actions I do. So one of the things I always try and do, like if you go into like a toilet and it's a bit of a state, I always try and make sure I leave it in a better place than when I found it. So just small things like that.
That's quite interesting. So when did you first start thinking about this? Like, when was the first time that you became sort of cognizant of it? And not to say this conversation, because I've asked you to sort of write it down for me, but like generally, when did you start thinking about these things and in the long, medium, and short term as well?
Yeah, so I actually studied philosophy module at university, and I think that's when people assume that that's when I started thinking about it. But actually, I was very, very disengaged from philosophy, and only did one term of it. So. Although I did philosophy, I was definitely not thinking about it then. I think it was after university and probably during COVID that I think a lot of people started asking the questions of, where am I going in life? Do I think my life is heading in the right direction? And what makes a good life? And if I was to get sick, what would I have regrets about? And so I think COVID was the first time that I started thinking about that.
Right.
And a habit that I have got into is every time I take a flight, when the plane is taking off, I think to myself, okay, I'm just going to assess my life as it is right now. If this plane was to crash, am I happy with what I've done in my life? So I started thinking about it during COVID, but I start asking myself those big questions again on flights, funnily enough.
So is it just on flights nowadays, or does it pop up in other instances?
I think it pops up in other instances. I think it pops up in times where you have a lot of headspace to ask yourself those questions.
Right.
But I think the flights are when I do a full scan of my life.
Right. No, that's quite
it's a bit of a funny time to do it, but
that also makes sense, because on a flight you have nowhere to go. You're just you're just waiting. You just have to sit down and just be
and
with your thoughts.
You have no control as well of
exactly
where your life, whether the plane is going to crash or not.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like you're just at the mercy of, I guess, life itself at that moment. So I guess I kind of resonate with you, but I think I don't know if it started happening during COVID. I think it's been more like the last couple of years, in that I tried to think of these things over the long, medium, and short term. But I think for me, it was more of I started thinking about like the flow of time quite a lot. Like, because sometimes I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, damn, I've gotten old. Like, but like, and it's weird because you don't really like think about it on a day-to-day basis, but then like you start seeing a bit more like tiny little wrinkles forming, or like a gray hair or two. I look at the clothes I'm wearing, I'm like, oh, look at this shirt, it's just not me, but it kind of is now, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, sometimes when I look at my parents and they've gotten older, and it's just like I think those thoughts are like ever present now as well. And it's just like, but I guess I haven't been able to sort of break stuff down into something a bit more actionable in the short, medium, and long term. Like, do you think that's like helped you in your day-to-day life? Like, are you cognizant of that when you're like doing stuff in the long term? Like, especially with this like the whole like deathbed situation, right? Like in the long term when you think about this stuff, because that's quite like to have that on your mind constantly, it can be probably quite difficult, no? Like,
it's probably not something, thinking about your deathbed all the time is probably not a good thing to think about. But I think instead of that kind of deathbed analogy, it's, in a situation, I think, what would help me in the short term? If I'm presented with a decision, it's this decision that I make, how is it going to affect me in the short term? How's it going to affect me in the long term?
Right.
How is it going to affect other people in the short term, and how is it going to affect people in the long term? Because often those two things are conflicting. Something that helps you in the short term often does.
So the whole delayed gratification type.
Yeah.
But I have a question. So sorry to interject just a bit, but just the thing is, like, when you do something, you don't know if it's beneficial until after you do it, right? So do you ever think about that? Or is it kind of like, because I think people are like always assuming ahead of their experience, right? It's like, I think if I do this, it will be beneficial for myself. It will be beneficial for those around me and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you've just got to like you've got to make your best guess at what can happen, and cross your fingers. And if things don't work out exactly how you expected, I think it's important to acknowledge that and then try and work out how you can adapt to this new reality that you live in. And if you can, try and get things closer to the objective that you originally shared, or that you were originally going for. This has also just triggered another thought. This is something that I discussed with my boss at work. I hate calling him boss because we're now friends. But so my friend at work, he explained something called the sigmoid curve, right. Which is where your life follows a path where things start going up, right. and then things start coming down, and that applies to everything. It applies to like how much you're enjoying your job. It applies to how you're enjoying food, right. and it describes your health as you get older. And a lot of people wait until things start going wrong, for them to start asking themselves these questions of like, right. okay, what do I do now about things going wrong? Yeah. How do I prevent falling even further? But the sigmoid curve encourages people to, when they think they're near the top, that's when you should really start evaluating where you are, and then thinking, how can you jump onto the next sigmoid curve to help continue taking you further up? And there's a period where you're jumping between curves where things feel a little bit unnatural, and you think, have I made the right decision? Right. Things are changing quite a lot in your life, but you have to go through that period of discomfort to start your new trajectory upwards. And I think that's also part of the reason why. So I've just decided to completely upheave my life, and I'm now moving to Dubai, and I really asked myself whether this was the right thing to do, because my life in London is great right now. I think it's quite a privileged position I'm in, to say that I'm very happy. I've got a good house. I have like lovely flatmates. But I felt like I was kind of like at that point
peaking,
where and so it's kind of like, what do you do next? Do you wait for things to go down, or do you?
So, funny enough, I do think of life in arcs. Essentially, like I feel like at every point in my life, I am going through some sort of arc, and that's just because I'm a very objective led person. Like I have things I want to achieve, and I normally like bundle them together to sort of create these arcs. And perhaps I think it might tie in this concept, right? Because it's like once the arc is complete, I'm assuming I'm at the top. I know it's not really an arc; it's like midway to an arc, right? But it's like, because I feel like whenever I complete all the things that I've said I wanted to do for like this period of my life, this phase of my life, I feel really good about myself. But then it's like, I kind of wait for things to like mellow out before I start developing another, I guess, arc for myself, like another set of goals, another set of objectives. And I think it's quite difficult though to like, because when things are good, like when do you just sit back and like smell the roses kind of thing? Because if your life is going really well, then you have to enter this like bit of like volatility and chaos when you like just go off and do something else because you wanna sort of begin another trajectory upwards. But obviously, like at first, it's quite difficult, I would assume, right? So how do you sort of approach that challenge? I guess like when you are facing something that you're about to do, that you're like, okay, I've never done this before, but you know what, life is good, and it could be even better. So why should I not take that risk? Like, how do you approach that? Like that question, like what is the thought process?
I think, going back to your arc analogy, I think it's when I feel like things have started plateauing. I really like to have growth in life, and if I feel like I'm not continuing to experience growth, or things have become a bit stagnant, or I'm becoming complacent, then I think, okay, right, now's the time to get into action and like make that leap.
But how do you decide what your next step is? Like, so this opportunity in Dubai, is it something that found you, or is it something that you found? Because I'm big on the whole, like, when you're ready, opportunities will begin presenting themselves, right? Because you'll start like aligning with, I know it's a bit like spiritual, but like I'm saying, I do think like things, as they become more prevalent in your mind, you see them more in the world. So if you're like at this moment, right, you're like, okay, things are stagnating, let me look for new opportunities. Do you find this was something that you sought out, or do you think it came to you and you're like, yeah, this sounds right?
I think for me it was a mixture of both. So this opportunity in Dubai was my an old boss who reached out. He had reached out to me a couple of times in the past, and I'd kind of brushed him under the carpet. I was like, I'll deal with this at one point. And I think I was sitting down and just thinking about where my life was, and noticed that I felt like I was being a bit stagnant. And thought, maybe I will actually reply to this message. Because he sent me a message saying, hey, have you thought any more about it? So I sent him my CV, and was just thinking, okay, I'll just roll with it and see what happens.
Okay. So tying this back into your initial thing, like how do you think this move will affect you in the medium term and the long term? Because like short term, right, it's the evolution. You want to continue challenging yourself. What's like the longer term implications of that, do you think?
I think this move has been a very, very difficult decision for me, because I don't know if it necessarily will better my life, the life of those around me, in the medium and long term. I think it's one of those things like we were talking about just now, where you don't have all of the information, so you don't know if it's the right decision to make. But I thought I can't know all the information, so I'm going to give it a go. And if it doesn't align with the type of life that I want to lead, and have the type of positive impact on people that I want it to, then I will be open to coming back at the 6-month mark, at the year mark, just saying, hey, this isn't for me, I'll come back. And I think I'm somebody who likes throwing myself into things.
Yeah, I think I'm the same.
Yeah.
Like, I'm very, like, I get hyper fixated
Yeah.
on like, my day's work. Do you, so you, like, obviously we've talked about like meditation and stuff in the past, and you go on your meditation retreats.
Yes.
Do you, I don't think I've ever asked you this, but do you meditate every day, or what's your ritual like with that?
I think I call myself a failed meditator.
Okay.
I got Headspace. I would try and do Headspace every
okay.
day. That didn't work so well for me. I then went on a meditation retreat, and after you come back from a meditation retreat, you have so much enthusiasm and energy, and I meditate every day for a couple of weeks, and then slowly the habit starts dropping. And I think it's a really, really important skill. I think prayer, meditation, having that, giving yourself that time just to like free yourself from thoughts and allow thoughts to come in and out, is really important. And it's a habit that I want to get back into.
What is the meditation retreat format? I think we've talked about this before, but I think it's a silent retreat. Right?
Yeah, it's semi-silent. Okay. I can definitely talk about it. So it's with the London Buddhist Centre.
Yeah.
And I just stumbled across their retreat centre because my family, I grew up in Suffolk, and I was on a walk one day during COVID, and I stumbled across this hut in the middle of a field. I was like, well, what's this hut doing here?
Right.
And it just had this tiny sign which said Vidrasana on it. And so I Googled it and found out it was the London Buddhist Centre retreat centre. And I said that I would go, and I absolutely loved it. The first one I went on was an under 25 retreat, and that was a long weekend. So I think it was 4 days. You arrive, you chat to people, you get to know your roommates, and because it's normally like 3 or 4 in a room, and you eat together. It's all vegan food, and then you go into their like meditation hall. They do a meditation with you, and then you go into silence until like the following afternoon, and that pattern continues. So you normally have the evenings where you can talk to each other.
Oh, okay.
Or you have like group talking sessions in the morning where you have like an hour where you can talk. But other than that, your day's just split up of walking in this like beautiful field and meditating, and they also put on yoga. It's very relaxing, and you're not allowed technology either. They really encourage people not to like smoke, and there's obviously no alcohol, and it's such a unique, wonderful experience. And I try and go at least once a year.
Once a year. How many years have you been there for?
So I think I went on my first one at the end of 2020.
Okay,
so I think I've done 5 now.
5?
Yeah.
Wow. How do you think that's... I always think they're one and the same. Like everyone who like meditates, like as a side effect of that, you become very cognizant of like life in the short, medium, and long term. Like it's just like by virtue of meditation, it happens. And I think you've just said like I think it's aligned in terms of timelines and that sort of stuff. So how do you think that sort of changed your interpretation of, I'm gonna say broadly, life in that sense? Because there must be a reason you keep going back, right? So I'm assuming it's net positive in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think going right back to your first question actually about when do I think about these things. I think, I forgot to mention that, going on these retreats is a really, really good time to ask yourself those questions. And I think that's why I like doing it so much is I realise a lot about, because you get like the physical distance from the life that you're living, you're a bit more objective about what you're doing, and ask yourself, are you happy with this? And you kind of, I think a lot of people in those meditation retreats promise to themselves that they're going to make changes when they get back, and I think people are generally quite good at sticking to those. And I think a part of the reason that I like going back to them is there is a calmness and a contentness that I felt on a meditation retreat that I have never experienced anywhere in my life. And the first time I went on a meditation retreat, I remember pausing and saying, you know, if I am ever in like a mental health crisis, that I know that I can go on a meditation retreat and all of those worries and all of those problems will somewhat disappear. And it's really nice having that as a backup, you know, when you think, the whole world's falling apart, my life is falling apart, I'm in an absolute state. You always have this safety net at the back of your mind where you're like, wow, I remember I had that calmness and that stillness before. Like, firstly, I know I can feel that again. And secondly, I can actually like take myself to the retreat and go and do that. So I think anyone that is, you know, experiencing a mental health crisis, I think it's a really good thing to do.
Have you ever tried to like evoke that in your daily life? Like in terms of that mindfulness? I know you say when you come back, you meditate every day for a couple of weeks afterwards, but it's always like you fall off. Because I've tried, I think I probably started meditating regularly, I think it was 2017. And I've been fairly on and off with it for like the last, 7 years now. But I think last year or two I've been very consistent. And I think it comes back to what you said, like that contentment. Like it's a bit of an anchor. Like I think when I'm going through, well, just anything, right? Life is very volatile. Things come up, people say things, you witness things, it's kind of like, oh, like it's like you get taken aback sometimes. And I think it's always nice to have that just there, right? And it's like right now you're moving to a different country. They might have a meditation retreat, they might not. But like, how do you think those teachings will sort of pull through into what you're trying to do next? Right?
Yeah. I think one of the most useful techniques is the visualization techniques. Have you? I don't know if you do that in your meditation. The first time that like that content and calmness washed over me, I was sitting surrounded by these like wildflowers in the retreat centre, and it was like quite a grey day, and then suddenly the clouds opened and, you know, there was like sunlight that started coming onto the field, and that was an incredibly vivid memory for me. And when life throws you these curveballs, I like visualising that moment and trying to remember how I felt. It's really nice.
So I have a similar memory, but it's not like, it sounds darker than it is. It was it was along like it was like Cinque, if you're familiar. It's actually it's like one of those, it's like towns along the coast of Italy. So there's 5 of them, and one of them, because it's a small town off the coast. So we went on this like pier area, and I was just looking out over the ocean, but it was like complete darkness. So you couldn't hear anything except like waves. There was like a small lamp next to us, but it was just pitch black. And that was like, I just felt contentment. Like it was very weird because it's like, there was just nothing. It was just like still. And it's weird how that can sort of evoke something in you. You know what I mean? And it's something like, that's something you revisit in your head mentally to sort of subdue you in some moments when you need it. And I think it's a really weird phenomenon, just because it's like why that moment?
Yeah.
Like what was happening then? Like what about that moment like made me have this sort of mental state kind of thing? Do you ever think about that?
I haven't. I'm thinking about it now. The first idea that came to mind, I haven't tested this. I don't know how true it is, but I think for me in that moment, it was accepting life for what it is. You know, like you can't control everything. The world is just gonna like keep spinning, regardless of whether you're there or not. And I think for me it was somewhat like evoking a feeling of dying, and just like you know that calmness and that stillness is what you're gonna feel in death.
For all of perpetuity.
Yeah, and being okay leaving the world like that. And I think that's why, just, you know, accepting that you're going to die and being okay with it Yeah, and feeling that things are going to be okay in the end.
I am. So are you familiar with like Tao and like the whole like concept of Tao and
is that
the
like
Tao
the
philosophy?
flow of the universe?
Yeah, like it's like the energy that permeates everything. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
Because there's a phrase I heard very recently called Wu Wei. Are you
Yeah.
familiar with it? It's like the action of non-action. It's like
Yes.
just letting yourself be still and letting the world happen around you. Because we often try to. I think people are like very controlling. Like they don't try to be. Like obviously, if you have things you want to do, like if you have dirty dishes, you have to go clean it. It's not going to clean itself. For instance, like people are just by nature very controlling, and that I think extrapolates to everything we do. Like we want things to go a certain way. We want things to be a certain way. So the concept of Wu Wei is that sometimes we just need to let go. It's like the action of inaction, because when you do that, you let the Tao work itself around you, and then you just allow yourself to flow. So I learned this thing like recently. I was just watching a video on it, got recommended to me, and I immediately thought of that memory in Cinque Terre when I was looking over, because I felt like at that moment, like I was just letting things just flow. Like I wasn't thinking anything. I wasn't trying to do anything. I was just trying to like be.
Yeah.
And I think it's literally impossible. I think like especially in London where everything's like people just so like they want to do things, right? It's a very active city, which is fine. But I feel like you never get that like in life. You never get that consciously unless you're at a meditation retreat. Unless you're sitting on your sofa, eyes closed, listening to some flute music or whatever it might be. That's how I meditate. But like at that point, yes, there is stillness. But like as I'm going about my day, or if I'm on the tube, if I'm on the bike, if I'm at work, coffee shop, whatever, you don't feel the stillness.
That's true. I really like that analogy of the like the Tao and Wu Wei. And there's something else that I like can add on to that as well. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the idea. It actually just might be Tao, but the idea of being completely in flow with the universe, and people. I think in Eastern philosophy they think that happens when you are doing something that you're giving your whole body to, and the world around you starts dissolving. And the people that tend to experience that are musicians. When you enter this, you're playing piano, and you just go into this trance-like state where all you're thinking about and all you're feeling is like music, and you're in one with the music. You can also get it when you're doing sports, when you're reading, and like capturing those moments is really nice.
Is that that's the way, right? I think it's what's his name? The samurai, Mishima Musashi, something like that.
I don't know.
So he wrote a book called The Book of Five Rings, and he wrote this like basically like he was a traveling samurai, and essentially he was like really good at being a samurai, and he would travel around and he defeated like 64 individuals in one-to-one combat, and he was like a legend at the time. And then during like the last years of his life, he went to a cave and he wrote down his principles, and he talked about the way. He mentions it quite often in this book. I haven't read it, but I know about it. And he says, when you give your all to something, and the way can be manifested in everything you do. It could be a gardener, it could be you just writing, it could be reading, it doesn't matter. But he says, the thing is, once you are in tune with the way, you are in tune with the process of just being. Like you're not cognizant of the universe around you. You're just in flow with the things that are happening. I'll find the name of the book. I'm pretty sure it's Mishima. Or Mushashi. I don't know.
I like that though. I would love to learn more about Eastern philosophy because I've only read small snippets. But I think there's some like really good teachings there, and obviously we don't really learn about it so much because of the Eurocentric philosophies.
It's more like the Abrahamic religions, right? That we sort of, and I think so. I've realized because I've tried to get in touch a bit more with because there's two arms to Hinduism, right? Because my family are Hindu, there's the more spiritual side, but then there is also like the religious side of things where you worship gods and stuff. And like as I get older, I find myself more drawn to the spiritual side of things, and sort of trying to understand. Like I do feel like there's more to things than just the things as they are. I don't know if that's something you resonate with as well.
Do you mean on a like God?
Not
level?
like more like there's like a, how do I explain it? Like I do believe in like energy and vibes and that sort of stuff. Like if you meet someone who's just good vibes, like they are easy to sort of be around, and then they make you feel better just by virtue of being around them, and that sort of stuff. And I feel like there's things like that you can't really explain, because I think I have met people that just they just are themselves, but just being around them sort of makes you feel better about life. And I feel like stuff like that is a very interesting concept that I don't think is always taught to us, right, as we grow up. But I feel like a lot of these Eastern philosophies, at least the stuff I've read, I think it encapsulates that a bit better.
Okay. And what you're describing is that those people make you feel better in the sense that they provide that stillness and that calmness, or is it more of a like energy, happy, smiley?
I think it's a bit of both. I think they are just happy just doing their thing. And I think that's always hard to do. I think there's always a gentle hum of anxiety in people's lives. There's always something, even if you're doing something, you're always thinking about the next thing. Like, oh, I have to do this. I might even have work on Monday. Like, there's always something. There's always the next thing that people think about. But I think occasionally you meet people and they just do it one thing at a time.
Yeah.
And I find that it's revitalizing, because it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what we were saying about way and just being, extrapolating that a little bit and bastardizing it. Like, somebody being fully present with you in that moment and like giving them, like they are giving you their full selves. They're not checking their phone while you're talking to them. They're not thinking about, oh, it's Sunday, I've got to send this email on Monday morning. And I definitely don't do that. I'm definitely the one that's like not present, but I think it's a really like nice thing to do. I just I have heard techniques from like Buddhist authors about how people can be more present in conversations, including in like meetings. If they're really, really boring, you know, it's really easy for us to switch off and go and do something else in the background. And what some authors suggest are things like try and find something interesting and engrossing in that person and what they're saying and how they're saying it. And that's also a really good skill if you're starting to feel really emotional in a conversation as well, and you're getting really angry at something that someone is saying. I think you've got to assume that somebody is trying to, like, someone's trying to be a good person, but you might disagree with how like
the approach.
And what they suggest then is looking at, like, hearing the pitch change in their voice and trying to notice that. And, you know, if you notice the pitch going up and down, it means that they really care about it. Right. If you see the lines start appearing in their face, like, try and, you know, watch the lines and see that, it, you know, this is something that they really care about, and stressing them out. And just try and find something about that person to help you feel fully present.
Wow, that's something I thought about before. And I think it ties back into what you said, right? It's like leaving things in a better place than you found it. I think if you are, like, say you are this archetypical person who gives your full attention to someone while they're listening, and you notice, even though you might not disagree with them and you're getting a bit emotional, but because you're giving it your all, you can respond to that. Yeah. And by noticing these little like intricacies in the way people are saying things, and be able to react to that and just like flow with the individual a bit better. Because I'm like that as well. Like I get like if someone says something stupid, then I then I just like, because I think it's hard because at that point, like you're taken out of that moment, and now I'm in my head just like thinking about my own interpretations of what they said, and thinking about my own like, maybe I should say this, or would that be insulting? Would that be rude? That sort of thing. And it's always difficult to manage because like you want to be honest and open, but then you also don't want to be rude. And I think, because I'm just going back to what you said, like it's like you're having this interaction with a person, and you don't want to come away with it, like both of you feeling worse off for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's always really hard to manage.
Yeah. What we were taught at work as well, and like, you know, handling difficult conversations, and I think particularly in instances where you're working with someone and these feelings come over you, and you're like, why have they why have they done that? And I think they suggest having a big inquisitive nature to why somebody has taken a certain approach, why they've done it a certain way, but not using the word why. So when you ask somebody in those type of environments, like, why have you done it that way? I think people immediately go on the defensive and feel like they're being attacked, because the why is loaded. And I think it's good to just be present with what's happening and get rid of your preconceptions about why they've done something, and try and understand where they're coming from.
I think it's hard to do that though. I think I think everything we do is just loaded with like these preconceptions, right? Like if someone asked me why I did something a certain way, I think it's like either I'd answer very confidently because I was very sure in the moment why I did it. But if there was any sort of doubt, I think I would just break down and just apologize. I'm so sorry for doing that. I didn't know what else to do. But that's just generally, like, I understand what you mean. Like, I think it's hard to detach yourself from that sort of stuff though. And it's hard to like envision yourself doing that, because it's kind of like, that's just it. Because I think at first it feels quite disingenuous. You know what I mean? It's just like, I have my opinions. I should be able to give them. But it's kind of like, how much are your opinions worth?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. No, but it's like, no, you're like, I'm talking about like as an individual, like, because then it's just two people just having a little back and forth and that sort of stuff. I'm also interested because I know you have you cycle a lot, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's just like, I think, obviously, I run a lot because I never shut up about it. But I think that sort of ties into this sort of meditative experience as well. But I want to get your thoughts on it.
Okay. Running, no, I don't think I'm fit enough to have a meditative experience while running. I think the whole time I'm like, okay, how many more kilometers to go? But I've definitely had that while cycling. I'll do a big plug for Taiwan, by the way, because Taiwan you can do it's like a big cycling location, so you can cycle around the whole of Taiwan in like 10 days.
Oh, right.
And I did part of that.
Is it bike packing, right? I think that's
yeah, it's really good.
It's really fun.
I did cheat though. I had an electric bike.
That's fine.
The people I was with did not have an electric bike, so they were a lot worse off. This is maybe why my experience was a lot more pleasant. But so we did part of that. We did like a 5-day East Coast trip, and I think while cycling through the mountains and going past waterfalls, definitely had those experiences that you were talking about. That like calmness, that stillness, having that meditative experience where the whole world kind of like dissolves around you, and you're just fully embracing just what's there. And it's really, really nice. I'd recommend doing a cycle trip to Taiwan.
Because I always think, I think doing stuff like that, where you are able to sort of just explore, I think just keeps you on that sort of upward curve. I think if nothing else, and this is why I like traveling so much, because I feel like it's just, there is like a financial concern, I guess, with it, but like I think is only net positive. like, do you have anything better to do with your time than see the world? Because realistically, like, no one's going to see the entire world anyway. So you might as well make a good effort to see as much of it as possible. And I think about this a lot, right? In any way that it would like manifest. But like, I'm big on just like walking around. I love walking around. I love running in a new place. Is just so satisfying to me because you just get like, I always get lost everywhere I run. I've never been. I just end up lost, but I like it because it feels like, oh, that's a cool place. Oh, that's a cool place. Like, oh, that's a nice view. Like, it's interesting to just spot these things as they arise because you never know where they'll take you, kind of thing. And I think we've kind of lost the experience of getting lost. And we've talked about this, right? Because I got rid of my my smartphone. So now I don't have Google Maps. So getting lost is something I've been more prone to happening to me. So it's kind of but I kind of like the process of just like going up to a bus stop and like looking at where the bus goes because it's so foreign to me. But I think it like serendipity can happen just based on that. Like, you can start talking to strangers because that, like, oh, do you know where this bus goes? And people think you're weird because no one does that anymore, right? Everyone just looks at the phone. But it's kind of cool. Like, it feels novel to just speak to strangers sometimes.
I think something that I like about getting lost in, especially on holiday as well, is a lot of the tourist centres are full of people between the ages of, 18 and 50.
Right.
But I think that when you start getting lost, you start seeing more elderly people. And I think there's so much to learn and see from how elderly people in different cultures interact. I actually met someone once who decided to go around China trying to understand how people in rural China who aren't that wealthy, how they manage to enjoy life and what a happy life means for them. And we stumbled across, I was walking with them and we were talking about this, and then we stumbled across a group of old people. They were probably like 70 to 80, doing like old people friendly Zumba. So there was a young instructor and they were getting like the old people moving and dancing, and everyone just looked so happy and so like immersed in what was happening right then. And I think seeing those small interactions outside of the tourist areas is really nice.
What did when you asked them about how they stay happy and contentment, that sort of stuff, what did they say?
So they, I met that person on day one of them landing in China. So they were right at the beginning of their journey, and we didn't end up talking to old people. We were just observing, and I think community seemed to be the biggest thing. Like that dance class. I don't know if it's daily, weekly, but I think that'd be a really important part of that person's week. They all knew each other. They were all friends, and having those people around you, I think, is really important. That's
really cool, because you're familiar with the blue zones, right? Like there's parts in the world where people like live the longest, and they have the highest proportion. And so like there's like 5 factors, I think, and community is one of them. So you have like people over 100 that still like smoke and drink wine every day, but because they have such a tight-knit community, like it increases their longevity. And I often other things included with that are things like diet, and I think a sense of well-being and adventure is also a part of that. Which is quite like, it's a bit different, right? Because for things like adventure and like expanding your mind, you can't sort of retain the sense of community. You kind of have to go somewhere else, right? Really. Because there's I forgot what it's called, but there's a part of the brain which is responsible for will to live. And essentially, as you start pushing yourself to do things that are out of your comfort zone, that part of your brain, which is responsible for the will to live, grows. And then you become more resilient as a human.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, because there's like several ways how not to die, right? To live long, from what I've read, and like it's cool because I like that one because I think it encourages you to keep doing more, and I think, and just going back to like thinking about my life on the long term, like you said, it was just like I want to have lived a full life, right? I want to have done as many things like as I can. And I'm not saying that life is like a tick box exercise, but it's like when all said and done, like did I do all the things that I said I wanted to do? Because I always think like when ideas come to you, like there's a reason. Because where do ideas come from? Who knows? Who knows, right? Like the things I think about when I'm meditating, like who knows where they come from? They just appear, and then you get rid of them, and then another thought comes, and then it's like a cycle, right? And it's just like acting on these little thoughts, because you never know where they'll take you, and you don't know what your intuition is trying to tell you. So a lot of the time, and I think the only way to get in touch with that really is to start doing some of the things, like some of the hunches that you get, just roll with it and see where it takes you. Because I think only by doing that can you really understand like what you appreciate about life and what you don't. You know what I mean?
Is the idea of taking yourself out of your comfort zone so that you learn more about the world and more about yourself?
Yeah. Because I think as you learn more about the world, it's like a reflection of yourself. Because I think it's only in the process of doing things can you really like understand yourself. Like it's only in the process of like writing or in conversation can you really understand what you think. Because that's when the ideas come out. But it's only like in the process of like realistically, like if I had to, so I like running, right? But realistically, if I don't know how well I can run until I'm like chased by a bear. Because at that point I would understand like, okay, I'm pretty good at this. You know what I mean? It's just like you can have all the confidence in the world within your little bubble. But the moment you leave, if you kind of like are very scared, very intimidated, then like there's elements to you that still haven't like, you know, grown. And I think about this a lot. And I think about this with you a lot as well, just because you're very adventurous. And to me, it's just like, damn, Indy's very adventurous. Because you're always going someplace, you're always doing something. And it's just like, you always like, just have this ability to sort of rack up Amex points and buy flights. And it's just like, damn, I need to be more motivated so I could travel more.
Definitely. Definitely a mark of privilege. I've got to like recognise my privilege there. But also, I think this is maybe a trait that I inherited from my grandma. She is incredibly adventurous,
right?
And I don't even think that necessarily relies on people spending lots of money going places. I think you can include that in lots of different parts of your life. What one idea that popped into my head is one of my friends, her mum decided to learn mahjong and then taught the village how to play mahjong, and now the village come together in the community hall every week and they all play mahjong together. And I think that's a really good example of like putting yourself, like having a sense of adventure, putting yourself outside your comfort zone to learn something. And like she's 80, I think she's 82. Damn. And like her sense of adventure is, okay, I want to have a smartphone, teach me how to use a smartphone, teach me how to use WhatsApp. And I think those things are so important as we get older, to like have enthusiasm about the world and openness to learn things.
And how do you think that you've responded to that as you've gone older? Like, do you think you've always had that, or do you think that's something that's evolved within you as time's gone on? Do you think you've always had a sense of adventure too? Because I personally was a very like introverted kid. I wanted to stay at home and play games. Okay. It was only when I hit uni and I was like, because that's when my bubble like 10x'd in size. And I met people from like all over the world doing all sorts of things. And I was like, damn, it's a big world out there. And I think that's when I started like traveling, started like trying different foods, my entire worldview just evolved to a different level. It grew exponentially. And I always think like that first 2 years of uni is where things like changed my life forever kind of thing. But I think I needed that, right? I needed that initial exposure. That was my initial like piece of adventure, because that was something I'd never experienced before. And it just changed my entire mindset.
And do you think that's something that you could have experienced when you were younger? Or did you have to wait until you were a bit more of like a fully formed person?
I think I was too scared. I don't know why. Like there was nothing to be scared about. I never wanted to do stuff. Like I would get invited to like birthday parties, but I'd just be too nervous to go. Like I would be invited to go to cinema after school. I was like, oh no, I don't know, like kind of thing. It was very weird. I don't know where the nervousness came from, but it was always there. Like I never really tried, and it's kind of it's a weird thing to think about in retrospect, because it's like completely different to who I am now. Like right now, I'm just like, yeah, screw it, let's go, kind of thing. Well, it depends, because sometimes I like waking up ridiculously early, so I might say no. But like, but other times it's like, yeah, why not? Like, let me try stuff, kind of thing. So it was kind of like I needed that, and that was kind of like forced into it, right? Because it was like just growing up, like uni was like something, it was mandatory for me really, like growing up, because it was just like brown family, you have to go to uni kind of thing. So I was like, screw it. So I did. But if that didn't happen, then I would be a completely different person right now. I'd probably still be the guy that sits in the room playing games. Yeah, so did you have that as well at any point?
Yeah, I think I maybe slightly different. I think I have always had a sense of adventure and have always liked putting myself outside of my comfort zone. But I think for me, a time where that increased massively was when I decided to go to China and study Chinese. I think I was 20 years old when I went. And I don't think I realised how big of a shock it was going to be. And I remember landing, and I had my insulin in a cool box, and the cool box only worked for 24 hours, and it was like approaching the 24-hour mark, and I got to my hotel, and the hotel suddenly said, oh, sorry, we don't take foreigners anymore, we changed our policy last week. And I was like, no, the cool box insulin. And eventually like found somewhere else to stay until I got like permanent accommodation. But yeah, I think throwing myself into that type of environment where you're suddenly having to problem solve a lot more, and you're like meeting different types of people, I think that led to me being a bit more open to, and being a bit more adventurous.
Fair. But so something encouraged you to go to China, right?
Yeah.
To learn and that sort of stuff. Like what was, because you weren't like that before. So
yeah.
what was that moment?
I think it was a combination of like stumbling across this course and being like, oh, that looks interesting, applying, and then not really thinking I'd get a place to go, and then also naivety about how difficult it was going to be. So I don't know if making that jump was. I suppose it was a little bit adventurous, but maybe not too much.
It's weird how you stumble across things, like the meditation retreat. Like your boss just messages you, you're like, oh yeah, sure, let's roll with it. So let's see what. It's very must be fun. Like, I don't. But
like, what's the worst that could happen?
But that's like that's such an optimistic attitude to have.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. It's always like it's the opportunity cost. Like it's like, what's the worst that could happen? But what else could I be doing? like that's I think that's always the question that props up every time. Well, any time an opportunity comes along, because it's like, okay, what am I doing right now, and what's going on here? I guess for me, I don't have the foresight to think about where I am on that curve, at that moment. Like I only become aware of it when I'm like done with all the things that I want to do, and I can feel myself slowly getting to this like too much stability. It's a bit too stale. It's a bit too, I don't say boring, because like I feel good most days, but you can also be like bored and feel good, right? It's like the security component of it, and it's just insane how you do these things sometimes. So. Like, because I'm just like, but you always have such a like optimistic attitude towards it, and it's it's very impressive. Maybe it is, maybe it's inherited from your family, but because I think my dad is a bit on the nervous side, so maybe I got it from him about like traveling and stuff.
Yeah, I think I've always been like that. Like when I was 5, I was diagnosed with diabetes, and I think the doctors were more worried than I was. I was like, yeah, give me the needles, I can inject, and I was like self-injecting from age 5. I've always been very much like, try it.
God damn.
Like, yeah, what's the worst? Yeah, what's the worst that can happen is a phrase I like to live by.
That doesn't like. But how does that tie in with your initial like philosophy of like thinking of things? It's like the short, medium, and long. Because surely that's a bit like.
Are they a bit contradictory?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of them is maybe a bit more of a short term.
I was gonna say. Okay, let me give you a hypothetical scenario just to round this off. So say I presented you with an opportunity that you had to go away for 2 years to do whatever you want. Whatever you want, but you had to stay in the same place for 2 years.
Yeah.
You didn't know anyone there. You had no option to come back until the 2 years was over.
Oh.
You didn't know anyone was there. You didn't know where you were going.
Yeah.
But you just had the option to go. You can do whatever you want when you get there, but you don't know where you're going.
Ooh.
Would you take this opportunity?
It depends how much I trust the person offering it to me.
It's me.
It's you.
I'm the person.
Okay.
No, actually, no. I feel like I'm too easy. I'm too easy to predict whether that would be.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's providing the opportunity. Someone you don't know has provided this opportunity, but for some reason your intuition says you can trust them.
Okay. Like a friend of a friend, like your friend.
Yeah, my friend.
Okay, but
I'm like, oh, Indy would be interested. She does this stuff all the time. Like, what would be your thought process from the short, medium, and long term?
Okay.
Sort of.
So my thought process would be. I would think, oh, this sounds really bizarre, strange, but I'm quite curious as to, like, I have a curiosity. I'm like, why have they picked this? And I wonder where I'm going. I wonder why they picked this place. I wonder why it was suggested to me, and I think I'd be quite excited by the opportunity because I think it'd be an opportunity to learn something new about a place, meet new people, learn new cultures, and then I think, what is the worst that can happen? And I think I also trust myself that I think I can normally get out of any tricky situation, and because I have that trust in myself, I think I would say yes to this person because I think I could face the challenges coming towards me.
One more question.
Okay.
What would stop you from saying yes to this?
What would stop me from saying yes?
What would life circumstances would stop you from saying yes to this?
I think on a very, very practical level, I think me having diabetes is actually sometimes a bit of a limiting factor. Like it's really difficult for me to go backpacking. I'm already having loads of difficulties like moving to Dubai and because they don't do my insulin pump there. So it would probably be something like, if I can't get access to medicine.
Right, that would be the biggest.
Yeah.
I mean, that would make sense because that's quite...
Yeah.
The repercussions are quite intense.
Yeah, but I try not to let my diabetes control my life. So I would think, okay, I'm sure I can work it out when I get there.
Brilliant. Nice. I think it's a good place to end it.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I think
It's okay.
yeah, it's been a really good
I
discussion.
had a good time.
Yeah, and I think also I think you're one of the. Feel free to cut this out because
I will leave it in just for that.
You were talking before about those type of people that give you like energy and just have good vibes. I think you're somebody who like has very nice vibes. You bring like a very good like calmness and stillness, and you make people feel very relaxed. So.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
That's very wholesome. I will cut that part out. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the discussion, and I will see you guys in the next one. Nice.
That's like a business deal.
I always shake hands at the end. I don't know why. It's just something I started doing, and now I keep doing it.